The night everything stopped. Some cases don't begin with chaos. No screams. No witnesses running into the street. No flashing police lights caught on camera. They begin with something much quieter. A routine day. A normal schedule. A person who should have come home and didn't. Susan Lund was not someone people expected to vanish. She had routines. She had responsibilities. She had a life that left behind patterns. And when those patterns broke, something felt wrong immediately. Because disappearances don't scare us when people vanish suddenly. They scare us when someone disappears without breaking character. Susan Lund didn't pack bags. She didn't empty accounts. She didn't leave a note. She simply stopped existing in the public world. And what followed was not clarity, but silence. Who was Susan Lund? Before this became a case, Susan Lund was a person. She was described as dependable, predictable in the way stable people are predictable, not reckless, not impulsive, not known for disappearing acts. People close to her later said something important. If Susan was going to be gone, she would have told someone. That single sentence matters more than any theory. Because true voluntary disappearances almost always leave signals. Emotional distancing, financial preparation, behavioral changes. Susan showed none of them. Her life wasn't perfect. No life is. But it wasn't collapsing either. Which makes what happened next impossible to ignore. The last confirmed moments. Every missing person case eventually narrows down to one question. What is the last moment we can prove they were okay? For Susan Lund, that moment was painfully ordinary. A normal interaction. A normal place. A normal timeline. No panic. No urgency. And then nothing. No confirmed sightings. No verified communications. No financial activity. Her digital footprint stopped like a switch had been flipped. And when a life shuts off that cleanly, investigators pay attention. Because chaos leaves mess. And this disappearance left almost none. The first search and the first problem. When Susan was reported missing, the initial response followed protocol. Search areas were identified. People were questioned. Timelines were reconstructed. But very quickly, something unusual became clear. There was nothing to follow. No abandoned vehicle. No confirmed location of distress. No scene that suggested violence. It was as if Susan had stepped out of the world between moments. And that creates the most dangerous kind of case. One where investigators must guess where to start. The silence that followed. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And still, nothing surfaced that could explain Susan's disappearance. No ransom demands. No credible sightings. No accidental discovery. And here's what's unsettling. Most missing person cases produce something early on. A witness, a tip, a mistake. This one didn't. Silence became the defining feature. And silence is not neutral. Silence either means there is nothing to find, or someone made sure of that. Theory 1. Voluntary disappearance, and why it falls apart. This is always the first explanation offered. That Susan left on her own. But the evidence refuses to cooperate with that idea. She left behind personal belongings, financial stability, ongoing obligations. She did not withdraw large sums, change identity, communicate intent. Voluntary disappearances require planning. Susan's disappearance shows interruption. Those are not the same thing. Theory 2. Accident without a trace. At first glance, the idea of an accident feels reasonable. People fall. People get lost. People make one wrong decision at the wrong moment. But here's the problem with that explanation in Susan Lund's case. Accidents almost always leave evidence of impact. A damaged object, a disrupted environment, a final location that tells a story. Even in wilderness disappearances, bodies, clothing, or personal items are eventually recovered. Even in water-related accidents, something resurfaces. Susan Lund left nothing. No abandoned vehicle in an unusual place. No personal belongings discovered later. No environmental clues suggesting panic or distress. For an accident to fully erase a person, every variable must align with near-perfect precision. No witnesses. No traceable movement. No recoverable remains. No accidental discovery later. That level of disappearance is statistically rare. Investigators understand this, which is why, internally, accidents without trace are often treated not as explanations, but as placeholders. A way to say we don't know yet, without admitting how little there is to work with. If Susan's disappearance was an accident, then it was one that behaved unnaturally. and that alone raises uncomfortable questions. Foul play, the possibility no one wants to name. Foul play does not always arrive with violence in the open. It often arrives quietly, through familiarity, through access. The most unsettling aspect of Susan Lund's disappearance is not that she vanished, but how easily she could have been approached without resistance. Someone who knew her routine. Someone who did not trigger alarm. Someone who did not need force. This is the reality investigators rarely say aloud. Most crimes are not committed by strangers hiding in shadows. They are committed by people who already exist inside the victim's world. And if foul play occurred, it likely happened during a moment that appeared completely ordinary. No struggle, no witnesses, no obvious crime scene. Just an interruption, a moment where Susan's timeline stopped and someone else's control began. But foul play cases require evidence. And evidence, in this case, refused to surface. That does not eliminate the possibility. It only limits what can be proven. And history is filled with crimes that went unpunished not because they didn't happen, but because they were executed cleanly enough to survive time. Why the case went cold? Cold cases are often blamed on lack of effort. But Susan Lund's case did not go cold because people stopped caring. It went cold because the case offered nothing to hold on to. No physical trail. No digital continuation. No mistakes. As time passed, memories softened. Witness certainty weakened. Leads expired. And silence began to feel permanent. Investigators often say the most dangerous cases are not the chaotic ones, but the quiet ones. Because chaos leaves fingerprints. Silence leaves doubt. And doubt slows everything. By the time years passed, the case was no longer about what happened, but whether it could ever be reconstructed at all. The psychological damage of not knowing. Unresolved disappearances don't just affect investigations. They damage people. Families of missing persons live in suspended reality. There is no permission to grieve, because grief assumes finality. Every phone call becomes a question. Every unknown sighting becomes hope. Every year becomes heavier than the last. And unlike death, there is no ritual to close the wound. Susan Lund became a name frozen in time. Neither alive nor confirmed dead. Just absent. That kind of uncertainty doesn't fade. It corrodes. Why this case still deserves attention. Susan Lund was not famous. She was not wealthy. She was not powerful. And that is precisely why this case matters. History remembers victims who come with headlines. But most disappearances don't. They vanish quietly. File numbers replace faces. And time does the rest. When cases like Susan's are forgotten, it sends a message that unresolved lives are acceptable losses. And they are not. Every unanswered disappearance leaves behind a question mark that doesn't belong only to one family, but to society itself. There is no clean conclusion to the case of Susan Lund. There may never be one. But uncertainty is not proof of absence. And silence is not truth. What happened to Susan Lund exists somewhere. In memory, in evidence lost to time, or in knowledge held by someone who has never spoken. And that is the most disturbing possibility of all. Because it means the truth may not be missing. It may be withheld. Some stories end with answers. Others end with acceptance. But the most haunting ones end with a question that refuses to die. And this is one of them.